us where you're from, and we will try to make sure that everyone gets the appreciation for being here. This event is organized by the Center for Development and Emergency Practice, CENDEP, at Oxford Brookes University, and CENDEP's Oxford Human Rights Festival, which has been running annually for the last 18 years. My name is Cathrine Brun. I'm the director of CENDEP, and Basma is also a CENDEPer, and she will introduce herself in a little while. We're organizing this event together with Oxford City of Sanctuary, who has been organizing Oxford Refugee Week since 2015. And I would like to thank Evelyn Godfrey for helping us to host and facilitate this, and congratulate Oxford City of Sanctuary for being able to put the whole Oxford Refugee Week online in a very, very short time. This event is a conversation between Basma El Doukhi and myself about Basma's life history as a stateless refugee. We will spend the next 40 to 45 minutes discussing Basma's story, and then we will then open up for questions from the audience, and you are very welcome to post your question, as I said, in the chat box, and we will gather the questions and engage with your reflections in the last 30 to 40 minutes of the session. I want to thank both Oxford City of Sanctuary, but also Unhcr, who's the coordinator of the Human Rights Festival, who is behind the Oxford Human Rights part, as you can probably see on the Zoom screen, who is helping us to host the event, who's organizing everything, and who will also help us to organize the chats and the question and answers afterwards. So with that, I would like to move to the main part of the event. And I would like to start by saying that in CENDEP, we often take this approach to learning about reality of displacement, of reality of wars, reality of crisis. We understand people's experiences, we understand crisis, we understand displacement through people's own histories. And I think this is a very important way of actually understanding what displacement is. What people have done, how people have encountered the challenges during displacement through their own narratives, through their own life histories, is a very important part of the way that we work. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to explore a personal experience, but perhaps also think about how that has wider implications for how we think about forced movement, forced migration, refugee experiences, and also how we welcome refugees. So this is our starting point today. And we will concentrate on Basma's story. Basma herself has a lot of experience from both being a refugee and helping refugees, and we would like to try to tease some of those experiences and reflections out from this event. So Basma, I would like to start by, of course, thanking you for doing this with us. And also maybe you can say a little bit about who you are, when and where were you born, where are you from? We could start there, perhaps. So introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Marhaba. Thank you so much, Cathrine. My name is Basma El Doukhi. I was born in United Arab Emirates in 1985, and I am originally from Palestine. I'm from a village called Al-Bassa in Akka district, very near to the Lebanese borders. And I am a master candidate studying at Oxford Brookes University, Development and Emergency Practice. Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about your displacement history. What is it that defines you as a refugee? What is the movements that you have experienced?
Mm-hmm. They defined me, and they defined us as a Palestinians to start, like as foreigners or stateless or refugees in Lebanon. My displacement history started actually from the story of my grandfather and my grandmother when they have been expelled from Palestine in 1948, and they came to Lebanon as refugees, and then living from my father, who lived also as a refugee in the camp, and then traveling outside Lebanon in order to earn livelihood. So he traveled to United Arab Emirates. I was born in United Arab Emirates, and I lived there for 12 years So I don't know actually about my Palestinian identity because I was living in a country. I don't face any kind of discrimination or like questions about my background or from where I am. When I come really to Lebanon, and I lived in a camp, in a refugee camp, where my grandparents and my father are living. So I started to know more about my identity, that they call us stateless, they call us Palestinian refugees. And I started to question why we are refugees, why we are stateless, why we are living in a camp, why we are not able to go again to Palestine. Because in United Arab Emirates, I was not really connected to that kind of environment, because we didn't discuss, we didn't share information. But when I lived in a camp, the interaction with my father and the interaction of my mom and the interaction with especially my grandfather and my grandmother, and I am really very grateful because we as Palestinians and me as refugee, I felt very connected to the stories of my grandparents about my village, the key of our house, the documentation of our house, even the location, the physical locations of our house and our village. So it started from there, living in a camp, and also facing multiple displacement. When I also was, when my father left us and sent us back to Lebanon to live alone after the separation between my mom and him. So I was living alone, separated from my father, and here I sensed the meaning of displacement. In addition, also to my brother just left Lebanon because he cannot tolerate the situation and living in UK as asylum seeker, and my other brother living in Germany as asylum seeker. So I start to ask myself a lot of questions about forced displacement, protracted displacement, why we are so separated from each other, why we should take that kind of decisions in our life.
So why don't you start with your experiences in the United Arab Emirates? You were there for 12 years. You went to school. Was that a school with lots of different people, or was it mainly Palestinians, or what was the situation?
Yes, I went to a public school. It was a school for people from different backgrounds, like United Arab Emirates people, Palestinians, people from also Egypt. So it was really very diverse background of people. So I felt really respected there, and I never faced any kind of discrimination or questions about my background. So it was really a very respectful environment, also, and very safe and connected environment. So yes, I spent my primary years studying in a public school, which is also well known in United Arab Emirates, that have a lot of people from different backgrounds, the poor people, the rich people, and the people from migrants as well. So this is also reflected the starts of my questions, like seeing a lot of Egyptians, Algerians, Palestinians, Syrians. So I asked my question, why they are coming to United Arab Emirates? Why not in Syria? Why not in Algeria? Yeah. So.
And then at what time was it that you left from UAE to move back to Lebanon?
I left actually after 2 years when my father got separated from my mother, so he was not able to handle the responsibility alone. So I, with my two other brother and sister, came back to Lebanon to live with my grandparents, leaving my father alone.
And at that time you were about 14?
Yeah, 14.
And
yeah,
how old were your siblings?
My sibling was Muhammad, was 2 years or 3 years. He was very young, and Abir was 5 years. So I was the eldest one.
Yeah. I'm the eldest too.
Yeah.
So then you moved back to Lebanon, and you moved where you haven't actually lived before, because you were born in UAE, and then you moved to a Palestinian camp.
Yeah.
And where was that camp located?
Yeah, refugee camp actually is the nearest camp to Palestinian borders with Lebanon, and it's 5 kilometers from Tyre city. It's in the south of Lebanon. So it's very near actually to my village in Palestine as well. If I want to take to drive a car, it's only 15 minutes and I can be there seeing my village in Palestine. Yeah.
Often when we think of a camp, we think of a flat, big area with tents or shacks. What kind of camp was your camp?
Yeah. Actually, starting by a camp, to clarify for Palestinians in Lebanon, it's a piece of land given to the Unhcr by the Lebanese government with agreement of the landowners. And Palestinians living in the camps, they don't own the land, but we use the right to use it as a residence. This is very important. So our shelters, we don't own them. Camp for me, our Palestinian camps, which are 12 in Lebanon, and especially particular Rashidiyya camp, it's a camp where UNRWA, the UN agency mandated for Palestinian refugees, is providing public services and administering the services in the camp. My Rashidiyya camp, it's a camp where we do have a very bad and very poor socio-economic conditions. People there are living in a very poor and very extremely poor socio-economic conditions. It's cramped living area, overcrowded living area. We lose the basic infrastructure like roads, like streets, like schools, and also we don't have like the playgrounds. We don't have like green areas. We don't have. And Rashidiyya camp, it's very closed camp. We do have one entry and exit military checkpoint. So you cannot leave or you cannot enter freely until you pass through that checkpoint. So in the camp where I was living, it's always overcrowded. I don't feel always that I have my private space because the houses are very near to each other. The windows are very near to each other. So if I am speaking in my room, my neighbor would listen to what I am speaking. You don't feel that it's safe, it's private, and you sometimes, because of a lot of also social concerns and security concerns, you feel that you are controlled. And I want to share this. I remember always that I look at the sky when I was in the camp. I was always looking at the sky. So I was asking my dad one day why I am always looking at the sky. He told me, you want to fly. And I told him why. He told me, one day you will know why you want to fly. So this is the camp. We cannot build in the camp. We are growing horizontal and vertically, but we are not allowed by the Lebanese government to build or to bring building materials. We are just living in a very restricted area, overcrowded, and even recently we don't have space to bury our dead. So we are using the seashore in order to bury our beloved people. So this is the camp, but at the same time, the camp have a lot of very connected relationships. We do have a very strong social cohesion, a very excellent community initiatives. People are really looking to each other. Suffering and difficult circumstances make us really build bridges between us and connections. And we try to understand that physical space and physical setting that we are living in. Also, we are suffering a lot, and we do have a lot of stigmatizing as well, because you are living in a camp. So like Lebanese or people outside always telling you, are you living in a camp? So they just imagine tents and imagine a very poor people are living without water, without food. So we do have a lot of very negative narratives about camps in Lebanon, especially also Rashidiyya camp.
Before we move on to that community and the camp as a community, for example, it's a very special story for you that you left your father in UAE and you moved in with your grandparents. So family must have meant a lot to you, but also there has been separations and loss and missing parents, etc. How has that story implicated on your experience of displacement, do you think?
Yeah, it has a lot of very, very positive implications, because it makes me stronger and it makes me more human and more understanding to the sufferings and to the experiences of other people. Raising as a separated child, not able to see my father, not able to see my mom, missing my father and my mom at the same time, have really taught me a lot about displacement and a lot about separation. And it supported me to discover my passion in this world. And that working with separated children, that's why I was very grateful that I started my experience working with refugees by supporting separated children and unaccompanied children, because it took me a lot of suffering, a lot of time and passion and patience as well, in order to understand the meaning of loss, the personal meaning of loss, and also the personal meaning of displacement in relation to separation. Because I was missing my dad, I was missing my mom, then I was missing my brother who is in the UK, then I was missing my brother who is in Germany, seeing my father crying every day because he cannot see my brother who left him before 6 years. All these have made me very emotional, and I want really to understand how I can reflect this experience, how I can learn from it, and how can I can overcome all these very bad narratives and big loss in my life, but also to transform it, to grow, to use it as a space for me to learn, to grow, and to help others. And it's very difficult to live as a separated child and to live as a separated and displaced child at the same time. But I have learned a lot, I have reflected a lot, and I can say now proudly, I am very grateful that I have lived that kind of experience, because this is what made me strong, passionate, and human as well, really.
And even though you had that separation from your parents and you were living with your grandparents, do you feel that you have benefited from having a family around you? The family has still been there, but there's been a distance, which is very difficult, I guess. But with that distance in mind, do you still feel that these family relations have been there, that you have managed to maintain them? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was also in a very difficult period of time, because I was adolescent, and it was the perfect time that I need my father and my mother beside me. But I am very grateful because I have my grandfather and my grandmother and my aunts who supported me with a lot of passion, with a lot of love and understanding. And actually, I am very grateful to my grandfather and my grandmother because of their stories about Palestine and about our village, about displacement. I have learned a lot as well about how I express myself, how I learn about my identity, my personality, my history as well, and how I write it. They supported me a lot, really, emotionally, personally, or they did their best. But I always felt that long distance, I am not able to cope with it, because I was at a time that I really needed the sense of family, especially from my father. I was regularly communicating with him, calling him, and he come to Lebanon to visit us. But it was really very emotional. And if I can share this very personal experience, one time when he come to Lebanon and visited us, I rejected to say farewell for him before he left to the airport, and I was crying. I told him, you come every two to three times to Lebanon to see us, but I don't feel that your presence, I really need your presence. I remember my father cried a lot at that day, and within 2 days he resigned and he came back to Lebanon, and he told me, thank you so much, Basma, because if you didn't do this, I will not feel that I should be there with you. And this is very important. This is the sense of family. This is the sense of connections that a lot of refugees now are missing. And that's why we should stress the importance of support and the importance of building that connections and welcoming people, building bridges with people, because that will be very helpful from my experience.
So when you moved into a UNRWA school in the camp, was it? And how did the other pupils welcome you into their group? It's a hard time to move, being 14, I guess.
Yeah, it was very hard time for me. Actually, I am very grateful to start, very grateful because I have learned in UNRWA schools. I was the first one in my class, and my teachers really were very excellent in teaching us and supporting us. And for the end of my life, I will be very grateful for the quality of education and the quality of quality of support from my teachers in Unhcr school, especially at Rashidiyya camp. For me, it was very difficult, Catherine, because I was bullied a lot. Because if I can share this story, I came from United Arab Emirates having very long hair, because it's a tradition there that you have a long hair. But because I was bullied a lot in my school from the students, and they don't consider me Palestinian actually, and they don't consider me as part of the camp, so they started just to bullying me and to play with my hair. My aunt decided, in order to protect me, she cut it. And this was the most difficult day in my life, that till now I don't feel that I am really overcome it, because it was a memory from my dad having that long hair, and a memory from United Arab Emirates, from my friends, from my environment. So she did this to protect me, but I suffered a lot from bullying at the beginning, but I overcome it. Yeah, but it was really difficult to accept people, to get connected to the systems, also the teacher, also to accept you as one of the students not living in the camp or coming new to the camp.
So when you were, you said in the beginning that it was moving to the camp that really impacted your identity as a Palestinian, as a refugee. Could you say a little bit more about that, and how that process, how that identity became important part of your way of thinking and being, and thinking about yourself?
Yeah, it was really very important, and very, very important to my life, personally and professionally, because as I mentioned before, in United Arab Emirates, I was living in an environment that usually we don't discuss more about Palestine. I know that I am just from Palestine, but in the school we don't learn about Palestine. In our house we don't discuss, like my father don't always. When I come to the camp, living in a camp, entering and leaving the camp through the checkpoint, and all the time seeing my grandfather watching the news and speaking about Palestine, and also getting to Unhcr schools, watching the blue flag as well, and learning the title of Unhcr in our schools, that it's mandated for the relief for the Palestinian refugees. So I come back to my grandfather, telling him, also studying the history of Palestine in our classes. So I come back to my grandfather and I ask him, I really wanted to understand more about Palestine. I really wanted to understand more about why you left Palestine, what happened exactly in May 1948. Tell me more about our village. Show me the documentation of our house. Show me the key of our house. So my grandfather and my grandmother with aunts started to share a lot of information, stories about our tradition, the songs, the food, how they left Palestine, and all this stuff. And from that time, I start to look about me as a refugee living in a camp, and me also understanding my identity and my history as well. And living in Lebanon, where also I am discriminated, marginalized, because I am Palestinian. So all this stuff helped me really to take a decision that I want to understand, I want to learn more, I want to get information, and then I want to document all these stories, because it's part of our history, verbal and written history. So it's impacted me a lot as well, to work with people and to go to older people and to learn about their stories, what happened, their journeys, personal journeys. And I started writing about it, documenting it, meeting people. So gratefully, living in a camp, seeing the conditions in the camp, meeting people, discussing with people, listening to my grandfather and my grandmom's stories, asking my father as well about his perspective while he's living in United Arab Emirates, and my mom. So all of these helped me really to start looking about really my identity and showing also my identity. They told us that we are refugees, but why I don't feel that I am a refugee? Why I feel that I belong to my home country? So this question was always in my mind. You are telling me that I am a foreigner in Lebanon or a stateless, but I feel that I have a space, I have a place to belong to. So all these narrative and questions in my mind from the stories of my grandfathers, my grandparents, and that's why we feel that refugees are very connected to the grandparents because of the stories, because of the narratives and the history that is shared, especially the verbal history.
So you talk very warmly about the camp as a place of social cohesion, of safety, despite the crowding, was very important for your identity, for feeling that you were together with your people, etc. But were there also aspects of the camp that limited you and limited your opportunities, and that you were frustrated about being in the camp, especially as a youth, I guess?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it has the both perspectives. It make me frustrated because of the, as I mentioned, the negative narratives about the camps, and especially when you leave the camp, if you have the opportunity to leave the camp, so people are, you just are marginalized and stigmatized because people just know that you are living in a camp, but they don't tend to understand or to ask you questions. What is the camp? Why you are living in a camp? What are the conditions in the camp? How we can help you? We don't ask these questions. So my challenge was when I was going outside and telling people that I am living in a camp, and I get that kind of stigmatization and even discrimination. Oh, she's living in a camp. She's Palestinian living in a camp. In addition, also, like you feel that you are in a cage, like as a bird in a cage. You are restricted. You cannot leave at any time you want before passing through a military checkpoint. You cannot, if you want to build a house, you cannot. You don't have a space to go with your friends. Like in United Arab Emirates, I was going to the parks, to the gardens, but in the camp, I was missing this. It's only in our school where I can have a playground, and it's a very small playground. So we don't have that kind of spaces that make us at least feel free while we are restricted within each other, while we are living in an overcrowded place as well. So this was like really the challenge or the dilemma that I was facing, living in a camp and adapting to live in a camp. But I am very proud because living in a camp made me strong, made me understand the sufferings and the experiences of a lot of refugees living around the world, living in a camps. So camp is not a stigma. Camp is a place where we are living and where we are creating relationships and creating a space for us to live in a dignity. And I always say, unfortunately, there is unmet need of dignity in the camps. That's why people stigmatize camps, because we don't have that the need of dignity is emphasized there. Yeah.
You know, for me, you know that I'm interested in this, but for me, it's also this aspect of the camp is a kind of temporary space. So some people think it's not a real space and it's not a real place. It's not a place where a community can be because it's only temporary. How do you feel about that? Because obviously these places have been there for such a long time. You know, that we just saw some of the images from the camp. It's concrete houses. They're not just going to go away immediately unless they're bulldozed or but how do you think about this camp as a temporary space?
Yeah, it's the feeling. It's more not more about the physical setting of the camp. It's more about the feeling and the connections to people, to the space. That's why I felt a lot of time I am expressing myself about identity crisis, that we feel that we belong to a number of spaces, a number of places, but at the same time we don't have that kind of connections, or certain places don't help us to feel connected to the place. And I can see from my experience and from my family experience that it's a temporary place, even though we have been living there for 72 years for now. But we always, Palestinians in Lebanon always say it, or refugees in general, they always have that kind of a dream to return back to their homeland, to their country. And it's temporary. It's a place that we are preparing ourselves to return, to go back. but at the same time you feel that also that connections in the place. And I remember one incident in 2006 when the Israeli war in Lebanon. My father, because they were targeting the camps, the Palestinian camps as well, in the south. So my father decided that he doesn't want, and was the milestone in my understanding of the identity and the camp as well, and the spaces. He told me, Basma, I was asking him to leave the camp and to go to Syria because I was very afraid. And he told me, look, Basma, my father, which means my grandfather, left Palestine because he was afraid. But I will not leave the camp, even if they bombed us here in the camp. I will not leave my house, and you will not leave the house. So I was asking him why we can return back to the camp. So he told me, I feel that I don't want to lose this house and I don't want to leave the camp. And at that time, he was having that sense of safety and security and deeper sense of connection, really, about camp and about our house. So it's more, Catherine, about feelings. It's more about the feeling of connectedness to physical places and how physical places are helping us as refugees to feel connected so we can move forward, or to feel stigmatized and hoping that one day this temporary place will not follow us when we return to our home.
So outside the camp, as a Palestinian in Lebanon, you were a stateless. Can you say a little bit more about your access to work, to university, to sort of being a member of the Lebanese society in some ways or the other? How did you experience that as a Palestinian refugee?
It's very difficult experience, but at the same time, it's a learning experience. Unfortunately, me as my community in Lebanon, we are facing a systematic layers of discrimination and stigmatization in Lebanon. So we are denied to be part in the social, in the economic, and in the political life of Lebanon. For me as a Palestinian, it's very hard because you feel you are discriminated at every level, Catherine. For example, in the job market, I always felt, and this is a very bad feeling, which I don't like to feel, but sometimes they put you in a position that you have to feel this. I always felt that I have to compete. I have to compete to prove myself that I am not a security threat, that I am not a social threat, that I am a good person, even if I am living in a camp, that I am very high qualified candidate if I am applying to a certain job, that please take me because I am Palestinian, but I am good, I am contributing. You have always to prove yourself. And this is really very difficult for a lot of refugees, because at the end of the day, it's not the intention in our life to prove ourselves, the intention to live our lives with dignity. Also, we don't have, like, Palestinians are prohibited from in Lebanon from working in 72 professions. So even if you get educated, you cannot work legally. And if you work, you will work illegally and you will be getting exploited. In the university, I faced a number of discrimination from my fellow students. When I mentioned that I am living in a camp, when I mentioned that I am, for example, visiting my grandparents in Ain al-Hilwa camp, so it's always you face that stigmatization following you every time, anywhere. In a taxi driver, taking a taxi with a taxi driver, when you are going to the hospital, when you are even entering public schools where we have quota for Palestinians. So at any level and at every level, you feel that there is a quota. They should be looking at your case because you are Palestinian, because you are refugee, because we cannot, and all this stuff. And feeling that kind of proving yourself and competition was very hard for me as a person, first of all, and as a human as well, because I don't want to prove myself. I don't want to compete with each other. And I remember, I will share this very personal story. It's hard, and it took a lot of time to overcome it, really. I remember I applied one time to a certain NGO in Lebanon, and I was rejected. And they sent me an email, not because I am not qualified, Catherine. They mentioned it very clearly that you are highly qualified, and we were really amazed by your interview. But we cannot take you because you are Palestinian refugee and we have quota. And at that day, I really was shocked. And I remember I cried a lot. And I said, please tell me that I am not qualified, but don't say that we rejected you because you are Palestinian and we have quota. So you have to fight all the time to find a space for yourself and also for my community as well. Living with all these layers of discrimination, daily discrimination, stigmatization, marginalization as well, leads to violence. So we feel that we are excluded from the community, from the life, and it's very hard. Although we are part of this community and we are contributing a lot in this community, and we have a lot of like markets, we have a lot of businesses, we have a lot of many layers of contribution to the country like Lebanon, but at the same time, all the time you have to prove yourself. And this is really hard. So this is my experience, my personal experience, but also my follows my community experience in Lebanon. Yeah.
Do you feel that you restricted yourself in terms of which jobs you would apply to, which studies to do because of that identity? Because you were thinking that no, I won't get it because I am Palestinian, or how did it influence your choices?
It influenced my choices a lot because I remember when I want also to enroll in university, I wanted to learn media and journalism. But my father rejected, and he told me, Basma, please, you cannot, because you will have a certificate, but we will not have a job. So they will not take you because you are Palestinian. So this was the first shock that I really wanted to study that major, but I cannot because I will not have a job. And you know, the situation for Palestinians, they need to work, they need to find a job after getting a proper education. So it was meaningless to my family to go and to study media and sit in the home. So I decided to study something like English language and literature because I will be teaching. I will be a teacher in Lebanese public school. But I faced, because I started my career as a teacher, I faced a lot of discrimination and exploitation from the Lebanese public schools because I am Palestinian teacher. So they know that I want a job and I need a job. So that's why I was a survivor or a victim of exploitation. And I cannot say no because at that time I needed work, the same that also my fellows or all my community as well. So we can become a victim of exploitation. And it influenced a lot also my choices to which NGOs, for example, I want to apply, which sectors, because I have to take into consideration the quota. I have to call many times to check. I remember I called many times, many NGOs before submitting my CV in order to check if there is a quota, yes or no. This is my situation, and it's the same situation that most of Palestinians in Lebanon are facing as well, and especially recently. It becomes more difficult with a very acute socio-economic situation. In Lebanon, it's become very hard for refugees, also for the Lebanese communities as well. Yeah, so it influenced me a lot.
So you were working as a teacher, but then you decided to start working for refugees.
Yeah.
How did you make that choice? And can you tell us a little bit about the different experiences you've had in working for refugees?
Yeah, I started my career as a teacher, but I always tell this: I didn't find myself. I didn't find my passion. I admit that my stepmother is a teacher and my sister is a teacher as well, but I always felt that there is something missing in this sector, and I am not feeling that I am really giving all of myself and all of my best in teaching. So I decided to apply for NGO and applied and I get the job. And my first experience was working with Palestinian refugees. So with Palestinian refugees and communities and also local authorities in the camps, which helped me a lot to understand the complexity of our situation. So it helped me to reflect on the insider and the outsider perspective of it. So I, as a refugee, facing all this discrimination and all this marginalization, but at the same time, working with discriminated refugees, especially children, women, and men, working with communities helped me a lot to understand the complexity of the situation, and helped me also to advocate or to start my passion. So I felt that this is the domain that I want to be. This is my passion. This is my cause in life. And I wanted to move forward for it. So, and then I started working with the Syrian crisis, and here was the shift in my life and my way of looking of things in this world, and in my also experience as a refugee. I felt from working with and for refugees, especially and asylum, Iraqi asylum seekers, I understood our plight as Palestinians, and especially my grandparents' plight and suffering and all the feeling of exile and displacement. I have heard a lot of stories about suffering, pain, loss, disconnection, displacement, which had a very strong impact on my personality and on my mind as well, which sometimes I find it very hard to understand or to digest. Working in Syria and working in Lebanon, especially working with refugees, have helped me to understand that refugees are not weak as they are stigmatized, are not depending only on assistance or depending on our help. They can be a catalyst of change. They can be a partner supporting us. And I am very, very grateful that part of my experience was working with refugees to support them and to empower them to take action and to take solutions, to do community initiatives in their settings, to help people, to provide counseling. So it was a milestone in my journey to work with refugees, especially volunteers, and also to work for refugees and to provide assistance and to provide counseling and to provide understanding and to be human and to know that you are individual, but you can do a lot. And I always very proud to say this, that if you make a change in one life, you will make a change in this world. And if I can share this story, I am very grateful. Before leaving to UK, I have received a call, and one of the Syrian fathers come to me and he told me that he named his daughter, this is his first daughter, Gair. So he named her Basma, because he's very grateful of all the support and the understanding and the encouragement that I have supported them during their journey from Syria to Lebanon. And I cried that day, and I felt very grateful because this is the impact. This is the impact that you cannot see, but this is the great impact that you are leaving in these people when you are supporting, when you are understanding, when you are sharing, or letting them feel that you do understand their experiences. So it was really a milestone, and I have decided that I want to be in this sector. I want to continue this and this because it's my passion. I want to be the voice of voiceless. I want people to know about refugees and to work for refugees. So it was really a milestone in my journey. Yeah.
So when were you in Syria working?
I was like remotely, even but before the Syrian crisis, like with the Palestinians as well. But it was interesting experience because I learned as well that you can work, you can be far away from your family, because I had always that kind of fear that I want to work, but to be with my family. So it was a really very challenge to take that decision and say, Khalas, I want to work in a far place. I want to understand other perspectives, other experiences, other contexts as well. Because we tend to generalize, to have a lot of generalization about refugees. So my experience there helped me to break that cycle, that we shouldn't generalize about refugees. Each context is very different, and each refugee individually is very different as well.
So then you decided to take a step back, come and study development and emergency practice with us, and maybe reflect on the work that you've been doing in the more academic way for a bit. But you couldn't stop your work, could you? So you started volunteering here in Oxford as well. Can you say a little bit about that? I also understand you won a prize, so I think you need to talk about that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, yes. I first of all, I get a Chevening scholarship, which I should say, it's the highly prestigious scholarship around the world. So I was the only Palestinian from 20 years from Lebanon that I get the Chevening scholarship in order to get and study emergency and development practice in Oxford Brookes University, and also I received a special award as a recognition from the Lebanese embassy, because they told me that we funded you, Basma, really a truly humanitarian worker, ed worker, and we want to give this award for you. So this is just a reflection why I wanted to leave, to take that space in order to learn and to grow and to reflect about my experience, reflect critically really about the experience and how really I can improve my perspectives. When I come here to the UK, I said I really want also to I cannot just sit in the house, and I cannot just go and continue with that kind of a humanitarian spirit. So I volunteered before the coronavirus. I volunteered in a number of NGOs in Oxford, supporting them doing monitoring and evaluation projects, helping homeless people, attending community sessions, giving awareness sessions about refugees, asylum seekers, women empowerment, gender equality, and also volunteering at Oxford, the Human Rights Festival, which was really very rewarding experience, which I have learned a lot. When the coronavirus came, I have decided that as a humanitarian and development professional, and it's deep in my spirit, I cannot just isolate myself, and I know that there are a lot of vulnerable people around me in the city. So I applied for the NHS, and I worked or I volunteered as a community response and chat in where I call persons to provide counseling and emotional support, and also I collect supplies and support people. It was really a very rewarding experience, because at that time, I like to say this statement: the more you support, the more that you are supported. Every time that I support people, I discover that I am myself supported emotionally, professionally, and even personally. Before telling you about the prize, I will share this very emotional experience, which I get it from one of my calls. I was calling one old British man here in Oxford, giving him like emotional support and just chatting with him. And he knows by accident, I don't know why, he asked about me, and he knows that I am Muslim and I am fasting. I will be fasting tomorrow. So I was calling him before a day from Ramadan. And he shifted the call in order to support me emotionally, because he knows that I will be far away from my family, and it's my first Ramadan far away. So at that day, I really felt really blessed, because I wanted to support him, but at the end of the day, I was the one who felt supported, especially emotionally. So this is what I have learned. Doing little things make really a bigger impact in the hearts and the minds and in the souls of people. And because of this, because of all my volunteering and community work in Oxford and in the UK as well, because I supported a lot of projects also in London, I get a special prize and special recognition from the Foreign Office and the Chevening Scholarship. I was the top scholar among 1,760 scholars in the world that did moreover 300 volunteering hours devoted for the UK and its community. So I was the top scholar for this year, and I was praised and appreciated by the Foreign Office and the Chevening Scholarship of this, as they mention it, an incredible contribution to the UK and to the community in the UK. So I felt really very proud. Why, Catherine? Because I was working, it's very rewarding experience for me, because I was working with refugees, supporting refugees to be volunteers themselves, to help their communities, and to do social initiatives and community initiatives. And then when I come to UK, I myself become a volunteer. supporting that community and helping that community. So it was a very great shift to reflect and to understand the importance of supporting refugees to be volunteers and acting yourself as a refugee, as a volunteer in a very difficult circumstances. So I found that it's a time for solidarity, for showing compassion, and for showing that we are in all this together really. So I wanted to support and I supported. And I am really very grateful, very, very grateful and very proud.
Congratulations, Basma, but also thank you very much for all your contributions. I wanted to start winding up for us, and maybe we can receive some questions and comments to help us to continue the discussion with the audience as well into the next half hour. But you have experienced different contexts. You're talking about some of the challenges in terms of stigma, feeling of discrimination, etc. In Lebanon, do you feel that it's very different to be a refugee in the UK than with the work that you have done? You know, do you see differences in those contexts? You talk that every context is different, every individual is having different experiences, but how would you contrast UK and Lebanon in this respect? I know it's a big question, difficult one, but are you able to reflect on that from your experience?
Yeah, actually, I will use these two sentences to start my answer. We are in this together, really, in Lebanon, in UK, or in different countries, and there is really unmet need of dignity in UK and in Lebanon. In Lebanon, the Palestinians and other refugees are facing layers of systematic discrimination, as we told, and marginalization. And when I come to the UK, unfortunately, I am really very sad to say this, that people are facing, they are not feeling welcomed, and they are facing layers of discrimination and difficulty in integration with the community, and they are facing also that kind of stigmatization. I want to say that refugee is not a choice. Nobody chooses to leave his country, but people are choosing that kind of choice because they don't have any other choice. So in the UK, I felt it's very difficult, Catherine, for refugees and asylum seekers. First of all, the immigration system is very hard for the asylum seekers, and it's making the asylum seekers' lives very miserable, really, with a lot of like the long outstanding applications and the delays in the decisions and all this stuff. And the refugees as well are facing layers of integration, layers of difficulty in integration, language differences, religion differences, stigmatization because they feel that they cannot really integrate. And which I want to also to reflect on the mental health issues, because refugees and asylum seekers are facing layers of difficulties and problems in relation to mental health issues. And when they come to UK, unfortunately, this country is causing more harm and increasing their suffering and make it very difficult for them to recover or to seek support, which I really felt very sad. Comparing to Lebanon, I found it really very difficult as a refugee or asylum seeker, because I have heard as well from a lot of asylum seekers, they are waiting from 6 years to get a status, and they are living in exile. They don't know if they are refugee, asylum seeker, foreigner. So it's hard in UK, but I can stress from my experience that really refugees and asylum seekers are in this all together, with the difficulty of integration, the difficulty of refugee status and immigration systems, the difficulty of seeking support regarding mental health issues and recovery from mental health issues, education as well, and a lot of stuff. So this was built because of my experience supporting, listening to refugees and asylum seekers in UK, and also working or volunteering with some of the NGOs that provide support for refugees and asylum seekers. So yeah, and I know like a lot of asylum seekers and refugees in UK, they are very reluctant to go and to ask for support for the mental health. And all the system is creating more harm and creating more trauma, unfortunately for them. And it takes long years in order to recover. And we do have also the idea of identity crisis. This place is not welcoming me. I don't feel connected or integrated. I feel that I have also my country, which I cannot return back. So where I am, that question, to whom I belong, to where I belong, this is a big question that I have heard from a lot of refugees and asylum seekers in this country and in Lebanon back then, and in Syria.
So this is the big question that we can perhaps end with before we open up for Q&A. So in one way, there's so many people around the world who experience this being in the crisis that's never going to be resolved, or it will take a long time. And the Palestinian case is, of course, one of the paradigmatic cases. But also on a more shorter term, you know, keeping people in that waiting situation, in that uncertainty, creates a lot of difficulties in people's lives. The fact that people are not allowed to make a life for themselves where they are displaced while they're waiting for a resolution, why can't they be able to be connected in different places, for example? That is one of the big challenges perhaps that we have today in the world of displacement. Would you like to give a final message before, and we will invite people to join us in the Q&A after that?
I will give two messages actually. One message to my colleagues who are humanitarian aid workers and working also development professional. Please, when you work with refugees and asylum seekers, work with them as partners, as catalysts of a change, and they don't look at them as a part of the problem or a part of the issue. Just amplify their experiences and really work hard to understand, because understanding and putting yourself in their shoes will be helping them a lot. Please, let's start to consider the abilities of refugees and asylum seekers. Let's shift the narratives that we as humanitarian professionals we have in our minds, and let's work with these people as really partners, and as a partners and as a part of the solution. And the interventions. My message to the refugees, and particularly to the women and girls, it will not be at all easy. It will be always very difficult journey. But what makes really worth it to live and worth it to share and worth it really to celebrate it, it's the resilience, it's the power, it's the continuous fight in order to live, to share the experiences, and to be stronger. Please believe in yourself, please work hard, and please seek support, because this will count a lot in your lives and a lot in the lives of other people. And please, this is a personal request from myself, share your story, because from my experience, personal stories can be very inspiring to your community, to yourself, to your family, and to the world. We need to share stories. We need to start telling the world the untold stories about the resilience, the creativity, and the contributions of refugees. You are not burdened, you are catalysts, you are part of the solution, you are partners. So start building on this. Reject discrimination, but reject it positively and try to learn from it and to grow. Try to create a space, even from my experience, even facing and suffering all these layers of discrimination and still facing it, I have learned that I want to create a space to learn and to grow personally, professionally, but most important, as a human. So this is really counts. Yeah. So, and believe in yourself and trust in your abilities. You can do a lot, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Basma. We have some questions who have come in already, and thank you so much for all the lovely messages in the chat, and a lot of appreciation for your story, Basma, and for your openness and your willingness to share your experiences, which we can learn so much from. I'm going to start with a question from Isme, who's a researcher based in Amsterdam. And she would like to better understand how, for you, being stateless shaped or impacted your experiences of displacement. Were there any particular moments when your statelessness became something impossible that would be different for people who are displaced or refugees who are not stateless, for example? So what did it mean for you to be stateless, and do you feel that being a stateless refugee is perhaps different from being a refugee with the citizenship, perhaps?
Yeah, stateless refugee is very different and very difficult for me, because at the end you are denied from all the basic rights and all the basic services like in Lebanon, and it become, for example, if I want to share my experience as well, like in Lebanon, it become as an excuse in order to marginalize you and to discriminate you because you are stateless, or we are doing this in order to protect your identity. You are preventing, for example, preventing you from building a house in the camp because we are protecting your right to return to Palestine. We are rejecting you to get a proper job because if you get a proper job and a salary, you will not be returning back to your country. So this really make me very frustrated and very shocked a lot of time, because this is not helping us. Refugees by nature wanted to return back to their home country, and they have that kind of return. So what we are asking is living in dignity, not restricting our services and our human rights because you want to protect our right of return. So this is the part of stateless which I always have heard in Lebanon. We are doing this to protect your identity. We are doing this to protect your right of return. And I find it very difficult also when applying for visas and when I want to travel, because it's very hard. You have to explain when you apply to the visa application, you have to meet people from the embassy, and also in the airport, you have to explain why you are carrying refugee travel document. What is your state? Why you are not Lebanese? Why Lebanese didn't give you a passport? So you do have a lot of discrimination and stigmatization, even when you want to travel, to move freely outside the country and even inside of the country. So this is make it very difficult as a stateless, but as a refugee with a citizenship. So you can have the citizenship of that country, but still have the refugee status, but have some basic of a human rights, the right of education. You can move freely, you can travel, you can claim your rights. But like in Lebanon, like my story, statelessness make it very difficult as well for me. And it was hard, very hard, because refugee and stateless at the same time, it's very hard for a lot of people, especially for very vulnerable people as well, like women and girls. So I hope that I have answered the question.
We will move on. We have quite a few questions coming in. Ruth Wilrich says congratulations on being recognized by Scheveningen for your volunteering work. Her question is, what, if you were head of UNHCR, would you do for the refugee population?
Oh, thank you for this question. Actually, I will be listening more to refugees. I will be having that kind of perspective of working with them, bringing them to the system as well, listening more, understanding more, and not talking on behalf of them, letting themselves talk about their experiences, needs, and also aspirations. And I would like also to do this, to make it as an initiative or as a suggestion, not for UNHCR only. So it can be a role model for other UN agencies or to the world itself. So put them in the center. That's it. I don't want to speak for them. I want them to speak on behalf of themselves. So I would like to see this really.
So let's promote a refugee-centered policy from here. There is another question from Elena Mora, who is an international educator based in Spain, doing research on intercultural competence. And actually, I think these questions follow very, very closely up to what you have just said. She has two questions. The first is, what are the two main solutions that you would propose to European countries so that they become more receptive towards welcoming migrants and refugees? I'll do the first question first.
Okay, thank you so much, Elena, for the question. I think it should having more welcoming strategy and more welcoming approach, understanding help like by the supporting more having integration and welcoming strategy and letting people in, not closing the borders, because this is not helpful. And the second is also understanding about the contribution of the refugees, because when refugees are coming to the local communities, they are not only burdens, and I reject to use this word, they are not burden, they are really catalysts, and they are doing a lot for the country and for the host community. So maybe also focusing about how we can use the capabilities, the capacities, and the skills of the refugees in our country as well. And remember, at the end of the day, any country can have a certain situation that push its people to leave. So it's more about global solidarity and global understanding as well. So I would like to see more integration policies and more work about integrating and inclusion refugees' contributions in the system, in the public. This is how I see it. And having and working on media as well. Trying to work more in shifting the negative narratives about refugees, and try to work more how to shift these narratives and to how to share positive stories about refugees as well, because media is impacting a lot. Yeah. I don't know if I have...
There is a follow-up question in a way, and I think you are coming towards that, which is why do you think countries in Europe have been so slow in welcoming refugees and migrants?
Okay, I will express my personal reflection. Because they are afraid, and they're afraid from people coming from war zones. And actually, if I want to say it, they are not able to show solidarity with people, and they don't want to be a part of the solution to help people, because most of the people who are fleeing their country and coming to the European countries are vulnerable people, unaccompanied children, separated children, women suffering sexual and gender-based violence, LGBTIQ community. So people that need support, people that need safety, they are afraid. A lot of reasons. Maybe internally I don't have the position to reflect on it, but I said that lack of solidarity and really feeling afraid, and lack of solidarity and courage as well. Lack of courage and also feeling afraid of people. Yeah.
There's a question from Raphael. There is another question from Anne Gibson, which I'll wait till the end because I think it's appropriate to end with. But before that, Raphael has a question, and he says, "I'm sorry for all the discrimination you have faced in Lebanon. It's in no way excusable. What role do you think Lebanese youth can play as part of the change around the current narrative facing refugees that are currently living in Lebanon, no matter their nationality?" So can we think of the Lebanese nationals or Lebanese youth who are also part of the narrative?
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for this question, because I wanted also to shift the narratives. I don't want also to speak about the discrimination and the stigmatization that refugees are facing in Lebanon, but at the same time, the level of solidarity and the level of understanding and the compassion that we have from a lot of Lebanese also communities and a lot of Lebanese people, my friends, for example, who are rejecting that the level of discrimination that we are facing, and they are doing a lot of initiatives like advocacy initiative. They are talking to their communities, for example, sharing stories about Palestinians. I remember one of the initiatives was inviting them to visit the camps, because most of the people fear afraid of the camps. So we were inviting them, come to the camp, come to see Palestinian people, discuss with Palestinian people, understand their suffering, and then you can reflect. So mutual visitings between the camp and also Palestinian visit other areas, mutual discussions as well, advocacy campaign that we did it a lot. Like recently we had a lot of demonstrations in Lebanon about the new labor law that is asking Palestinians to have work permit. And I remember that the first people who went to the streets were the Lebanese people who are supporting Palestine, rejecting this. So we really need, thank you for the question, it's very important. We really need to capitalize and to reinforce about the positive initiatives and the positive negatives of rejecting the discrimination that refugees are doing, and what we can do. For example, as jointly between refugees and Lebanese community or host communities, actually sharing my story, what I do, sharing my story, sharing my reflection, it's part of the solution as well, because I belong to Lebanon. My family is living there. I lived in that place, and I really wanted to live in dignity. That's it. To live in dignity as any other human. So this is the minimum request that we are asking. So yes, I totally agree with you, and we need to work more as well. Like sharing my experience here in the UK as a refugee, my personal story and my professional story is helping a lot of people in the UK and in Oxford as well to understand about refugees, to understand about Lebanese context. So yes, continue to raise awareness, continue to be really brave to speak and to be vocal about it, not to feel afraid, because if we want to feel afraid, we will not be able to fix issues, and we will not able to say that this is wrong, but we can really work on it. We can really improve it. So this is what I can take from this question, and what I am doing actually. This session is one example of what I am doing.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, as the privilege of the chair, I guess? Because we work, as you know, we work with the Center for Lebanese Studies in Beirut, and one of the projects we're doing at the moment are looking at trajectories of young people from education into employment. And what we see in our project and what the Center for Lebanese